audio version of The Kennel by Elijah Green. Actually, me and Hovind. If I had not seen it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears, I would not have believed it. It was almost like a bad dream, only it was real. I never imagined such a place could exist in a free country. This story is so bizarre that if you were telling me, I would not believe you. Nevertheless, I was there. All I can do is relate what I saw and heard and let you decide. I would never have noticed the place if I hadn't slowed down for the cow crossing the road. Actually, I had to stop and wait while she stood right in the middle of that little traveled country road and looked at me with that blank, non-thinking stare that only cows can give. While I waited for her to slowly chew her cud and contemplate her options about what to do next, I happened to notice a reflection from a glimmering object among the trees, way off, maybe 200 yards to my left. As I turned and focused, I realized it was a large area enclosed with a real tall chain-link fence topped with shiny razor wire, obviously where the reflection had come from. What? Why? Who? It made no sense. Well, Bessie finally discovered there was no grass in the middle of the road and slowly moseyed off into the field. But I just sat there trying to get my eyes and brain to agree on what I was seeing over in the woods. Why would anyone build such a huge fenced-in place crowned with razor wire? And why, way out here in the middle of nowhere? What, or who, are they, whoever they are, keeping in, or is it out there? Nothing about it makes sense. So, being curious and mostly uninhibited by nature, I turned and slowly drove down the long, narrow drive and stopped in front of a very large gate, which was also capped with shiny razor wire. There, over the top of the gate in giant letters, was a sign that should have satisfied, but actually only intensified my curiosity. It read, State Kennel of Middletown. I unconsciously turned off the radio and rolled down the window, as if that would help me read it better. And that's when I heard it. Hundreds, and I mean hundreds of dogs. They were barking, yelping, and howling in the most pitiful, heart-ripping sound I had ever heard. Immediately, it brought tears to my eyes. Why?
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
Why would anyone lock up all these dogs? Didn't they have a home to protect somewhere? Weren't some children out there who would love them, pet them, and run around in the grass with them? Grass? It hit me. I saw lots of concrete, steel, and razor wire, but hardly any grass. It made no sense to me at all. Why were so many dogs locked up in here? Now, don't get me wrong. I know that some dogs are vicious and dangerous and need a place like this. But this place was huge. Could all these dogs be vicious and dangerous? What could it all mean? Chapter 2. I was still trying to process all the sights, sounds, thoughts, and now smells when a nicely dressed man opened the gate and walked up to my car. Hi, he said. I'm John Cox, the kennel keeper. May I help you? On his suit coat, top pocket was a professional-looking name tag that read, John Cox, kennel keeper. So I knew he was serious about who he was. Still slightly confused, I smiled weakly and said, Hi, my name is Elijah Green. I was just passing by and saw the fence. I've never noticed this place before. What is it? What do you do here? Mr. Cox seemed pleased with my interest, almost as if he were eager to show off his kingdom, and said, This is the newest, most advanced state-of-the-art kennel for convicted dogs in the state. What type of work do you do, Mr. Green? I've worked at Springfield Hardware for the past 8 years. Ah, you are a ways from home. Would you like a tour of the kennel, Mr. Cox asked. Well, being really curious...
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Well, being really curious now and totally unable to comprehend who, what, or why, I quickly said, Sure, that would be wonderful. Mr. Cox looked pleased. We don't get many visitors way out here. Park your car over there by my black Porsche, and I'll show you around. Let me call right back, Rick.
Okay. 1.
Thus begins the story that no one will ever believe. But it's true, I was there. Mr. Cox and I walked through the massive gate. It slowly closed on its own and made a heavy, almost sickening mechanical thud as it automatically locked behind us. I cannot explain the feeling of panic, dread, or hopelessness that suddenly came over me as I heard that sound and actually felt the ground shake a little. You would have to have been there to understand. It was eerie. I was nearly overcome with claustrophobia, and I was just inside the fence. I shuddered. Anyway, Mr. Cox seemed eager to tell me everything, sort of like a kid with a new toy. This is the newest and largest kennel for convicted dogs in the state, he bragged. There are just over 1,600 dogs in here, and we run it with a staff of only 25. 1,600, I exclaimed. Why so many? Oh, no, he corrected me. The question is why so few? There are over 2 million dogs in our state, and only 14 kennels like this. This is only one of 10 kennels operated by the state. The other 4 are privately owned by ICC, the Incarcerated Canine Corporation, operating under state contract. At present, there are 6 large companies and several small ones, which have gone into the private kennel business. Interrupting him, I asked, who owns ICC and those other private kennel companies? They are mostly owned by rich folks and senators. The founder of ICC was the former chairman of the Republican Party in Tennessee and friend of the governor. In fact, the governor's wife was a substantial investor in ICC, as was the Speaker of the Tennessee House. Even some judges are shareholders. One of their large stockholders was recently appointed by the president to be a trial judge in Tennessee. They say he's been in the courtroom as a lawyer on only 2 occasions. Some of the families representing their dogs have had more courtroom experience than him. The other kennel companies do not operate in this state, so I do not know as much about them. However, we get a monthly magazine, the Kennel Monthly. Maybe you'd like a back issue. It has ads for the latest security devices available, as well as articles about some of the privately owned kennels. I do know that most of the private kennels are subsidized with tax dollars. In spite of our rapid growth, we can currently only hold 1% of the state's dogs. There are several thousand more dogs that have already been convicted and are on a waiting list to come in when we get space. The waiting list is so long in California, their Kennel Officers Association has proposed building a few mega kennels that can hold up to 20,000 dogs each. Our country has the largest kennel system in the world by far, he announced proudly as we walked past rows of cages. I struggled to imagine what it must be like to be one of those dogs locked in a really small cage. Mr. Cox, if there are 14 kennels in this state, how many kennels like this are there in the country?
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
There are well over 900 kennels nationwide, he boasted. This country has only 5% of the world's dog population, he continued, yet 25% of the world's incarcerated dogs are in our kennels. Proof that our country is the safest place to live. There are now over 2 million dogs in kennels like this across the country. Just 70 years ago, there was only 1 kennel in the state, and it only had 300 dogs. But Congress passed new laws making more things a crime, and judges have been giving longer sentences. The kennel population has increased by over 700% in just the last 40 years. For female dogs, the incarceration rate has risen 1,200% since 1970. State law requires us to have 40 square feet of space for each dog. So we are licensed to house 1,200 dogs in here. But I thought you said there were 1,600 dogs here now, I said, questioning manner. Mr. Cox looked a little puzzled and said, there are. Well, I don't understand. Doesn't that break the law and overcrowd the dogs? I asked. He thought for a brief moment and said, it does overcrowd them some, but hey, they are just dogs. As for breaking the law, it actually doesn't. In a money-saving effort, Congress has authorized us to be overcrowded by 37%. The kennels in California operate at 200% capacity. You see, we are allowed to put in an extra 250 dogs if it's on a temporary basis. That is, if their dog blanket is not attached by Velcro to the floor. The law allows for that. How long is temporary? I inquired. The law does not specify a time limit, he replied as we slowly walked past hundreds of cages of sad-looking dogs begging for attention. All kennels take advantage of this loophole in the law and are overcrowded, but hey, they're just dogs. Oh, I see, I said almost mechanically. How about the other 150? Let's walk over to the shed, H-S-H-E-D, he smiled, as we veered off to the right and walked to the corner of the compound. This will explain the other 150. Chapter 3. Wow, these cages are even tinier, I said as we approached. And there sure are a lot of them. What is this area? This is the shed, he replied as he pointed to the sign and read, Special Housing to Educate Dogs. The dogs in here are being educated. I stared at the sign and then at the dogs and said, I don't understand. It looks like they are being deprived of everything. They don't have room to run around. They are isolated and cannot interact with other dogs. I don't see any toys for them to play with. They can't even see the sun or the sky from their cages. How does this educate them? He waved his hand slowly toward the cages and answered, These dogs either broke kennel rules or are under investigation to see if they broke a rule. Depriving them helps educate them to obey the rules of the kennel. My stomach knotted up as I thought of the poor dogs locked up in there. How long do you keep them in there, I asked. By law, we can only keep them in here for 90 days. However, if we don't have space in the regular kennel, we can take them out for 10 minutes, and then we can legally put them back in for another 90 days. I can't imagine what 6 months locked up in that tiny cage would do to a dog. Do they ever get out for exercise? I asked. Oh, yes, he said. By law, we have to let them out into a bigger 20 by 20 cage for 1 hour each day, 5 days a week. It's a real nuisance to our staff, though, so we try to schedule the exercise time early in the morning when it's cold and fewer dogs want to go. Plus, we can always cancel if it's raining or if we're short on staff that day. Hello, Esau, Mr. Cox said with a slightly sarcastic tone to the dog on our left. Esau, I inquired. That's an unusual name for a dog. Well, Mr. Green, Esau is not the dog's name. It's an acronym which describes the dog. It stands for extra stupid and ugly. Regardless of how many times we beat and discipline this dog, he will not learn. He'll be back in the shed not long after he gets out. It seemed awfully cruel to me to hear him make fun of the dog that was totally at his mercy at the moment. My mind quickly recalled scores of examples from history where prisoners were treated cruelly by captors just because they could. I decided not to say anything about it and asked instead, do the dogs get good food in here? Oh yes, Mr. Cox beamed. All dogs in the kennel get a well-balanced diet, regular annual checkups by the staff vet, and dog biscuits every Christmas and Easter. They get a bath once a month and a new flea collar every 90 days. Even the dogs in the shed get that. Although we try to keep the kennel clean, possibly 70% of the dogs will be carrying an infectious disease when they are released. Dogs that are really sick are often released early to save money. So it's rare for a dog to die in here. However, some dogs just do not respond well to some of the drug therapy provided. Speaking of money, I replied, who pays for the medical when you release the sick dog? And who pays for all this? It must cost a fortune to run this kennel. Oh, it costs a bundle, all right. That's the beauty of it. The dog's owner is responsible for the sick dog's vet bills once he's out. The taxpayers and the dog's family and the state foot the bill for the operation expenses of the kennel. It's all part of the state budget. We charge $20 per day for each dog. If we spend it all, we can justify asking for more next year, Mr. Cox answered. $20 a day, I exclaimed. That's $600 a month, over $7,000 a year, times 1,600 dogs. My mind raced. That's over $11 million a year. The state could pay to send a person to college for less than what it costs to keep one dog in here. Actually, it's more because we charge $25 for each dog in the shed. So our budget last year was close to $12 million, Mr. Cox said, smiling. And you're right about the college. My son just graduated from Middletown Community College. His tuition and books for the year was about $5,000. Over the past 20 years, funding for incarcerating dogs has increased by 127%, while funding on higher education has increased by only 21%. We also get a pretty healthy sum of money from the National Veterinarians Association each year, he said proudly. Chapter 4. What's this about the National Veterinarians Association? I asked slowly and almost mechanically as I was lost in thought. I could not see any good reason why they would give money to a kennel. I was thinking through all the who's, what's, and why's my mind could come up with, and finally, the words almost fell out of my mouth before I could even think to stop them. Why would the NVA give money to a kennel? Oh, they do lots of medical experiments with our dogs, he boasted. Since we have so many in one location, they can test new drugs in the food and experiment with new procedures right here. It saves lots of money and red tape for the NVA. Currently, an estimated 45,000 researchers are conducting experiments in more than 10,000 programs. I don't know the statistics of how many dogs are involved. The United States is the only country in the world to officially sanction the use of incarcerated animals in experimental clinical trials. Even the CIA is involved in various mind control experiments. The Nuremberg Code of 1947 was drafted in direct response to the barbarity of the Nazi-era medical experiments on Jews. But Mr. Green, these are just dogs, so it's okay. It's exciting to know that the dogs they experiment with here may save some human lives in the future. At another kennel several years ago, they did experiments irradiating the dog's reproductive organs and were able to reduce fertility rates to near zero. That will save thousands of unwanted puppies from being born. Do the dogs or their owners know these experiments are going on, I asked. I don't know, he said with a slight cock of his head and a quizzical look. I'm sure the NVA does everything the law requires. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. After all, they're just dogs. Maybe to you they're just dogs, I thought to myself, but I bet they're more than that to their families. This tour can be an educational experience for you, Mr. Green. Something you should pass on to your children is the importance of keeping their dogs under control. I had a gut feeling this tour was going to give me more of an education than I ever dreamed. Mr. Cox, I said, you told me that you had 25 staff here. Do they get paid well? Oh, yes. State jobs offer great benefits, he said. They get full medical, dental, life insurance, and lots of state holidays off with pay, plus 3 weeks paid vacation. The lowest paying jobs are the kennel cleaners. They start at about $30,000 a year. Everyone working here at least 20 years gets full retirement benefits at age 57. The privately owned kennels do not pay nearly as well, unless you are a cage broker.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
That's a sizable pay for an entry-level job, I replied. What do the top people make? Oh, I think the top executives in the Bureau of Kennels start at about $150,000 a year, he said. Sounds like these jobs pay better than what I make. Mr. Cox, how do I get a job here?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Sorry, but you can't, Mr. Green. You're too old. What I demanded, I'm only 41, and I'm obviously younger than you are, Mr. Cox. Besides, there are laws that protect against age discrimination. Yeah, but Congress makes exceptions to the laws for us because we deal with vicious animals. Even the Attorney General approved these exceptions. I've been working for the BOK for a long time and will retire in 2 years. So, Mr. Green, unless you are a veterinarian, you can't be hired for these jobs, not even as a secretary. They don't want an older workforce here. In fact, we have a mandatory retirement at age 57. So if I don't like retirement, maybe I can come work for you, Mr. Green. The Attorney General does not have the right to approve exceptions to the law, I stated emphatically.
15.
All I know is he did. All I know is he did, Mr. Green, and that he decides which laws they will prosecute. I am not in a position to question such matters.